In this class we're going to look at job analysis. Job analysis is an important element in recruitment and selection of candidates. Quite simply, it's important that the most appropriate candidates are selected to work on specific jobs. So there must be a match between skills, abilities, aptitudes. There must be a match between the people selected and the precise requirement of the job. Anything less than that will lead to inefficiencies and will lead to a mismatch between the aspirations of the people recruited and the requirements of the job, which may lead to frustrations, lack of motivation, and ultimately a high level of staff turnover. The process underlines key duties, responsibilities, skills, objectives, and working conditions for a job being advertised. So the job must be clear, and the job specification must indicate precisely what is required so that candidates can look into themselves, can look at their own skills and abilities and experiences and match themselves against the requirements of the job. The information is brought together to form a job description and person specification. So the requirements of the job are listed. The specific skills that are desirable or absolutely required are indicated. The working conditions, the precise functions that will be engaged in or expected, these will all be listed so that there is a precise job description and a very honest job description. And then the person specification, what the ideal candidate should have, should be listed against that. Now the contents of job analysis. Well, an effective job analysis must contain the following. It must contain the purpose of the job and what the job title is. In other words, how is the job described? How will the job be described in terms of its delivery in the future? If it is a machine operator, then it will describe that the job involves running a particular machine. If it's a delivery job, it will indicate that the job is to do with delivery. It's quite self-explanatory. But the purpose of the job and the title of the job are macro descriptions of what the job entails. So again, as I said, the candidates know precisely what they're applying for. The main duties and responsibilities and the task of the job should be indicated as well. It may be, for example, jobs such as working on machines, as I said earlier, or making deliveries, may entail using initiative. Sometimes the jobs are not straightforward, and some working around may be required on the part of the operative or the part of the worker. So the responsibilities of the worker is to complete the task, to complete the job. But that may require some initiative and working around to ensure that any problems encountered can be overcome. So what is the objective, or what are the objectives and achievement outcomes of the job? So what are the objectives of the job? What's the job attempting to do? When is the job completed? When will it be achieved? When is the task completed? There must be a start point and an end point. And what are the outcomes? What's the result of applying effort in this job? What's the outcome at the end? It could be a component of the machine or a delivery that's successfully made. If it's in the office, it could be the accountant completing a set of accounts or completing some task, some financial task. So it's important that the job is precisely described and outcomes can be indicated. It's also important to know how performance will be measured and what supervision will be required. So outcome may be measured in terms of units produced in a given time period, the number of components made in a day. That could be a measure of output. But some tasks, it's difficult to measure the outcome. Back to accountancy, for example, it's difficult to measure the outcomes of the accountant. It's difficult to say, well, the profit and loss account and the break-even analysis and so on should be completed by 5 o'clock today. Accountancy doesn't work that way. It's important that the figures are accurate and checked, and the figures are available and the figures are found. So all of it means that there has to be some sort of flexibility. There may be deadlines, but the deadlines are not perhaps as precise as someone working on a machine making components, making so many components per hour or per day. But nonetheless, there has to be some degree of measurement and some degree of supervision that enables the job to continue. The job requirements, well, what resources are required and what qualifications do the candidates need to have in order to apply for the job and to be able to complete the job. It may be that it's just school requirements, school leaving requirements, successfully completing basic education. Or it may be that it's a highly specialist job and a degree in chemistry is required, or a degree in some particular function is required, or some professional qualification may be required. So it's important to work out what the job requirements are and what resources and what qualifications are needed to complete the task. So here we've got a list of aspects of job description: the purpose of the job, the title of the job, the main duties, the responsibilities of the job. What are the objectives and what's to be achieved in undertaking this particular task, and what are the outcomes of the job? What's made at the end? What's delivered at the end of applying effort into completing this task? What is the outcome? And how will performance be measured, and how will it be supervised? And what are the job requirements in terms of resources and qualifications? Now, that provides a good overall picture of what is required to describe a particular job so that recruitment into that function can take place. Now, collecting research for job analysis. Well, there are various research methods available for management to complete a job analysis. For example, observe current employees' job responsibilities. Who's doing what in the current jobs, and where are there gaps? Where are extra personnel required? And what sort of people are required? What sort of skills and aptitudes and abilities are required to fill that gap precisely, to fill it efficiently? It could be internet research, look at the typical responsibilities and duties of the job role. So look at what other companies say about this particular task. And some jobs tend to be more generic. A machinist working on, let's say, on a milling machine. Well, there are many people who work on milling machines throughout industry. Well, what are the requirements to be a good milling machine operator? What are the qualifications? What are the experiences? What are the conditions faced throughout the whole of industry for people working in this particular task, working with milling machines? And then apply that locally to the company for which you work. Look at what the national conditions for people working on this machine are, or try to get some indication of the terms and conditions that apply to them, and modify them locally as required. Modify them for the company as required. Research business policy, procedures and requirements. Look into the particular task that's required and be critical and ask, is it absolutely required? Does it fit with current business policy? Is the business policy, for example, to invest in new automated machinery? Is the business policy, does it have some sort of, the strategy that's under consideration at the moment, does it have some sort of indication that the function, this particular function, will be redundant in the future? It'll be replaced by a different way of making the item or of acquiring the output that would have been produced had this particular task gone ahead, had this particular job gone ahead. It may be, for example, that a company in future wants to buy in this particular component and not make it in-house, not make it within the business itself. That may be something under consideration. So it's important to understand the strategy of the business when looking at jobs and trying to analyze what sort of job it is, what sort of people are required to fill the job, what sort of candidates are required, and actually asking, is the job itself required? It may be that there are alternatives. Another way of collecting data, or collecting information in trying to describe jobs, is to interview the current job holder to get an insight into the job requirements. If it's a situation that there is somebody doing the job at the moment, talk to them about all aspects of the job to try and get a proper description of what is required in the future. So if the job is currently being undertaken by someone, talk to that person and ask them to describe the job. Spend some time, observe them, talk to them, interview them, and that's a good source of information so that a job description can be drawn up that precisely matches the requirements of the company. Now, the application of job analysis. Job analysis can be used in the following. It helps in recruiting employees against job requirements. So it looks at the employees against the requirement. It lists out what the job requirements are, and it looks at employees and tries to get a match between the two. It tries to match up or look for areas where particular employees have particular skills that are very appropriate. It may look at some employees that have skills that are not really that relevant to this particular job. So it's trying to get a match between the employees and the job requirement. It's generally the case that there may be some training that's required. Some resources have to be allocated for training, and even some place has to be allocated for training. It might be that there is a training centre that the company needs. Depends on the size of the company, of course, but if it's a large company, they may have a training centre where they can train the candidates or train the people who have actually got the job to be more specific to the requirements of the business. So training may be an issue that goes hand in hand with the job and with the job specification. So the candidates are recruited, personnel are recruited to undertake this task, but there is an understanding that their skills were perhaps more generic and that need to be more specific to that particular company, and to get them more specific, training will be required. It's important that there is a fair rate of pay for the job. The candidates who are being sought to fill this particular vacancy, they must be attracted in. And by and large, people work for various complex motives. They work for the pleasure of working, the idea of earning a living, the idea of getting out of the house in the morning and having routine in their lives. But it is also clearly true that people work for money. People work for a salary or for a wage. And it's important that they are valued and they associate their job as being valued. In other words, it commands a good rate of pay, a fair rate of pay. So it's important that the job specification indicates that this job is important to the company and that they are going to pay a fair rate of pay for this particular job. It's also necessary, of course, to look at any health and safety concerns. Depending on the nature of the work, there may be issues that have to be specified and discussed up front. There may be health issues. The job may entail some degree of risk, and the company must take every precaution to try and ameliorate or to reduce the possibility of injury or hurt associated with undertaking that task. So it's important to be as honest and as open in terms of the job specification, the job description, as is possible. Now, the job description and the person's specification. Well, let's look at the job description. Vacancies that have been advertised must contain an up-to-date job description. So they must talk about what the current job description is. It's a good measure for candidates to ensure the job role is suitable. Job description indicates to candidates what the job entails and whether they are suited. So there's an element of self-selection. Candidates look at the job description and think, yes, they could do that, or no, they can't do it, or they don't have the necessary skills, or whatever. So there's an element of job selection, self-job selection involved. So it's important that the job description is accurate and as detailed as is possible. It should aim to inform the candidates of the job purpose, the duties and responsibilities, the key tasks to be performed, the member of staff the employee is responsible to, and overall accountability. So the job description should be a document that enables candidates to self-select, as I said earlier. Look at themselves, look at their skills, their abilities, their past experiences, and decide whether they have the appropriate requirements, the appropriate skill requirements, the appropriate qualifications to apply for this particular job. Now, the importance of the job description, well, it helps managers define a job vacancy and how this vacancy affects the organization structure. So a job description is a very useful document anyway. It's important. It's an important document within the business because departmental managers, divisional managers, they can see what is required, what the job specification is for each worker within the division or within the department. So it's a clear indication of who's responsible for what and what needs to be done. It also helps the recruitment team select the right person for the job. Clearly, as I said earlier, there must be a match between the job requirements and the skills and qualifications and experiences of the applicants. So the recruitment team are able to marry up the requirements against what the candidates are offering. And that will help them make an appropriate selection. It can form a legally binding contract of employment. So there may be an issue here that if candidates are recruited to perform exclusively this particular job specification and then later on the company wants to move that person into a different role, the contract of employment will have to be renegotiated. Clearly asking someone to do something which is not a part of their job description can be tricky. It could lead to legal issues. So the job description is an important document that must be developed with care. And it establishes individual performance and objectives. It describes what is required of the candidate in terms of their application to the job, their attendance, the times they will be at work, and what's expected of them at work. It's all tinged, of course, with what is reasonable behaviour. Now, the contents of job description. Well, a job description must contain the following. It must contain the job title and specific department the job will be carried out in. So it must indicate what the job is. Just a short description of the job. This job will involve the person working on the monthly accounts, if it's in the accountancy section, or this job will involve the candidate producing so many of these items off this particular machine per month. So it may be quite descriptive like that, or it may be looser. It may say performing general accountancy functions within the office, including, and list out some of what may be required, or it may be this particular candidate will work in the engineering section and will produce items to an acceptable standard. It could be quite vague in that sense. It should contain relevant background information regarding the job. This will include some of the items we've already discussed, health and safety issues and the location of the job and what is required in the job, and also talk about some flexibility perhaps to give the management the options to vary the job as requirements dictate. It may be that technology is evolving and new, more automated machines, more precision machines are about to be delivered, or new computers are going to be bought into the administration with dedicated software or whatever. So the candidates will be required to update their skills accordingly. And that could be written into the job description. The purpose, objectives and outcomes of the job being advertised. So in other words, the job description should try to indicate what the purpose of the job is, the objectives and the outcomes. As I said to you earlier, these are important details to be included in the job specification. And of course the duties and responsibilities of the person. These are also important. Now the person specification. Well, a person specification is also a crucial element in the recruitment process. A well-written person specification details specific qualities a candidate must acquire in order to perform the job satisfactorily. So it talks about the skills, the aptitudes, the experiences, the abilities of the person and what is desirable, and also talks about their appropriateness to the job. It may be the job is evolving and that new skills will be required in the medium term, in the next year or 2 years, because technology is evolving in this area. And the person recruited must have the mindset that they want to be trained, they want to update their skills, they want to engage in this new way of doing it. So they're going to come in now, if they're successful in their application, and work with the existing technology. They're going to work with the existing routines of the job, but knowing that they will be updated at a later stage. So a good, well-written job specification should detail the quality of the candidates and talk about not just their existing set of skills, but their willingness to update their set of skills so they are better prepared to work in the future. A person specification is mainly broken down into 2 requirements: the essential and the desirable. So there are essentially 2 parts: what is absolutely required and what the company would like to see. What they would like to see in terms of the person's flexibility, their interest in the job, their interest in updating their skills, the pride in which they have about working in this particular area. So these would be desirable. The essential is, can they do the job now? Can they actually do it? So that's the basic requirement. The desirable is what comes with that. With a job specification, candidates benefit as they can assess whether the job is suitable. So when people have got good CVs and they've got good documentation about themselves and they itemize the types of experiences they've had and so on, they have a good perspective of themselves. They're able to self-assess and they're able to compare that with the job requirements. Now, the content of a person's specification. As I said earlier, it must be broken down into the essential and the desirable requirements. Now, the following must be present: the qualification and knowledge of the person, absolutely essential; the skills and capabilities of the person. Now, this may include some reference to previous jobs and on-the-job training and supplementary training that the candidate has undertaken, perhaps attending night school or working in various occupations that has widened their skills. And that overlaps with experience. Itemize their experiences of working in this particular occupation. And what were their big achievements, and what did they like most about it, and what did they learn, and what are their ambitions within this particular area? Is there a qualification they want to achieve, or what is it they want out of the job? Not just salary, but what else do they want? The content of a person's specification. Well, continuing, we've got qualification. Now this should specify any qualifications necessary to fulfill the job. The qualifications don't have to be written examinations. It could be qualification in terms of evidence that they can do the job, evidence that they are enthusiastic, willing to engage this job, and they're appropriate for the job. So it doesn't have to be an academic qualification or a skills qualification, or it could be a qualification which is more personal, that they are suitable to do this job and they are motivated to do it. That could be the qualification. But other qualifications, such as college qualifications in a particular area, or university qualifications, or whatever, apprenticeships, or whatever it is, these qualifications must be clearly expressed as either essential or desirable. The qualification may not be essential. What may be essential is the person's motivation and experiences. So the qualifications may be desirable because it shows something else about the person. Perhaps it shows their ability to engage in further training in the future as the technology changes or as the requirements of the job evolve. But qualifications might include, in the UK it might be the General Certificate of Secondary Education, or it could be a diploma, a business diploma for example, or it could be advanced level qualifications at school. It could be a degree, or it could be membership of a professional organisation. And these help the applicant to justify their contention that they are motivated, interested, keen to learn, willing to take on challenges, get involved with the job. So the qualifications are something that the individual may want to bring to bear. We've also got knowledge as part of the person specification. Strength of subject knowledge. If the company's recruiting someone to work in chemical analysis, they may want someone with a higher degree in chemistry, in that particular type of chemistry, or have done some research in that type of area. They want the person to show off, show what they've done. What's their strength of interest? What do they know about the subject? If it's in engineering, what have they achieved? What knowledge have they got? Not just specific to a particular function, but what's their overall knowledge? Because it may be that in the future this function will vanish, but that person will have gained company experience and may be very valuable somewhere else within the organization. So what's the overall knowledge of the person? How has this been assessed? What sort of school qualifications or college qualifications, university qualifications has the person got? Now this knowledge could be in all sorts of areas. It could be in accounts, or it could be legal, or it could be business management or marketing, or it could be in engineering, or it could be just in health and safety. Now I say just because that applies right across the organization, and it's a very important function. It's a service function within the business, but having a safe environment in which to work is important, and the person coming in may have, as well as being an engineer for example, may also have qualifications in health and safety. Now that's highly desirable. The skills and capabilities. Well, candidates need to have certain skills to be able to complete the job role successfully, I should say, or satisfactorily. the skills that the person has may not be documented, and there's a problem there. It may be that the qualifications that the person have are general qualifications in an area, but they may have additional skills that they've acquired from on-the-job experiences in previous organizations. And the only way to discover that is through the interview and selection process, to try and probe what sort of skills and what sort of challenges did the person meet in the past and successfully achieve certain tasks or certain undertakings. So it's difficult, for example, to assess a person's customer service skills. Probably the only person who can do that is the customer. Some documentation can be produced. References, for example, from a previous employer may be a good indicator of the person's skills in particular areas. But there are issues there as well. It depends on why the person left the company and the terms on which the person left. They may have left causing problems for the previous organization, which means the manager writing the reference was not very happy with them. Understanding the sector and the ability to work in groups, these are very difficult to assess, and assessment centres may be used to try and get an insight into the person, but generally speaking very difficult to assess. But it's important to specify that if these are requirements, if it's a requirement that the person should be able to work in groups, have good customer service skills, and a good understanding of the particular sector that the company operates in, then the applicant should self-select and should be honest to him or herself. If he or she is not honest to him or herself in the application stage, it will lead to issues down the line. It will manifest itself as problems later, and presumably nobody wants that. Moving to experience, well, relevant past experience related to the same or similar job. Past experience is important. Wide experience is important, and for that reason, looking at a candidate who has worked in one company in one particular area doing one particular job means that person's experiences is very narrow, and that person may not be able to cope or be happy with a more dynamic environment where there is change or proposed change, or there's a new way of doing this particular task. So it's important to look into the experiences. It also, wide experiences may reduce training costs. So it's important that at the selection stage some attention is paid to past experience and the attitude of the person towards future training and widening their experiences within this new environment. Experience can be either voluntary or paid. Sometimes people learn on the job and get experiences on the job, or sometimes people may look for experiences related to the job by enrolling themselves on courses or trying to read up about particular processes or particular ways of working in this particular area, and the job almost becomes their hobby as well as their occupation. They are interested and keen to understand more about the particular situation, in which case it's voluntary. But for many shop floor activities, it's normally paid. The company provides training and supervision and tries to improve the skill level of its workers by example and by in-house tuition, generally speaking. Now, the experiences can be stated as essential or as desirable. If experiences are essential, they should be stated up front so that in the self-selection process, when the applicant reads the job specification, they know that this particular skill is absolutely vital, and if they don't have it, there's no point in applying, no point in wasting time. If it's desirable, it means perhaps they haven't got it, but they've got something related, or they've got some other experience, or they're just simply very keen to have that experience. Maybe that's why they're applying for the job in the first place. They want to have more experience. They are keen to learn and keen to widen their skill base. So specifying experiences as essential or desirable is a good way of helping in the selection process, and in particular in helping in the self-selection process. Now let's try and conclude. Job description and person specification both develop the requirements for the job. A job description describes the job and its requirements, as you'd expect. The person specification states the specific person suitable for the job. It states what sort of person is best suited for that particular job. What sort of skills, abilities, ambitions, motivations. Takes a whole picture of the person and tries to describe who will be best for that particular job. So it's an important method of selection of the right candidate for the job. So, and it's the one that's generally speaking used. Job selection is not haphazard. It's an important function to get the right people into the position, which will not just foster good working relationships and have an interesting working environment. It'll be efficient and it'll be dynamic, and it'll help the business grow and prosper to get the right people in the right jobs and presumably at the right time, but with the right motivation and a workforce that's looking forward to new experiences, to learning new things, and to engage in their own personal development. That's all I'm going to do in this session. So I'm going to conclude the class and say thank you for watching.